And we are officially recording. So, welcome. This is going to be our fourth episode of the Take 3 Theological Variety Hour.
Welcome,
Yay,
everyone.
we've lasted this far.
Yeah,
Woohoo! So, let's just get going. Seth, tell
sure.
us about a saint or some saints.
Cool. Yeah, well, I've been sick this week, so everything is kind of a blur, but I know that we have had some really good saints go by. Last weekend we had Elizabeth of Hungary and also the Jesuit martyrs of El Salvador, which their feast day coincided with the Ignatian family teach-in in Washington, D.C. Another Jesuit martyr today, Miguel Pro, who died during the Mexican Revolution. But the person that we are going to talk about today, really briefly, is Saint Clement, and I'll let our listeners know that the way we came about talking about Clement sort of was a, I don't know how you'd say, like a misunderstanding. So I mentioned that Clement's feast day is today, and I know that Erica has done a lot of work on Clement, but the Clement she's done a lot of work on is actually not the Clement whose feast day is today. So there's two Clements, Clement of Rome, who's celebrated today, and Clement of Alexandria, whose feast day actually was dropped from the Western calendar by the Pope in the 16th century uh, because of doctrinal deficiencies. So,
Boo.
but
What
anyway,
does that
so
even mean? I'm sorry. What do doctrinal deficient? Okay, whatever. Keep going.
Clement was the teacher, as you know, because you're the Clement person. Was the teacher of Origen. So some of Clement's stuff is pretty like high flying. Um, anyway, you can our listeners can look him up on Wikipedia and see what some of his interesting positions were. But anyway, um, so Clement of Rome is the third bishop of Rome after St. Peter, so he's one of the very early popes. And what I did to prepare for this, so in Chicago, the parish I went to for many years was St. Clement. So I'm used to seeing Clement's face all over the place, but I hadn't ever really read a whole lot about him. We do have one extant writing of his. It's his letter to the Corinthians, which is actually written during like the period of like the biblical period, like when many of the New Testament writings were written. His letter to the Corinthians is actually older than some of the texts that did make it into the New Testament. So I thought that was interesting. It's a
Wait,
rather. Oh, go ahead.
question. So, the third pope's letter to Corinthians, I'm assuming it would be older than like Revelations.
Definitely. Like any of that Johannine stuff is newer than
Relatively
Clement's.
speaking. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Go on.
Um and it's like 60 some chapters specifically about kind of a dispute they were having in Corinth over ministry. So Clement kind of tries to put that to rest. Apparently, some of the presbyters there in Corinth were deposed, and so he is calling for them to be reinstated, and then also kind of delineates what the responsibilities of the different ministers are between presbyters. He uses presbyter and bishop kind of as the same term, um, and then, of course, deacons. So that's what we know, like factually, or that's what we have directly from Clement. There's another work that was ascribed to him, but scholars have um, found out that that wasn't actually written by him. But what I went to get the dirt on Clement, of course, because of my research background was to look at the medieval document, the Golden Legend.
Yay!
Yes, love the Golden Legend, even though it's full of a whole bunch of nonsense.
Whatever, it's fun reading.
It's definitely fun. So, and actually, what I found in the Golden Legend is really interesting. So, all right, first of all, the entry on Clement starts out very much like a soap opera. There's like long lost relatives and people get lost at sea, and then there's like big reveals.
Are we talking like Telemundo soap opera or like Days of Our Lives? Because there's a difference.
I am not an expert on soap operas, so is Days of Our Lives the one that had the possessed lady like in the 90s?
No, that, oh gosh, it'll come to me, but no. The telenovelas are a little bit more towards possession oriented soap operas. Days of Our Lives is a little bit more neutral,
Okay.
less dramatic, less supernatural.
Well, there's nothing really supernatural, so let's go with Days of Our Lives. So
Okay, good.
basically what happens is Clement's mother and two of his brothers go on this sea voyage, and then it's sort of like, I don't know. It's like she would fell in love with one of her servants, and so she went on this sea voyage to get away from her husband. I don't know. It's kind of like, I don't know. Anyway, so then she is in a shipwreck, and she thinks that her two boys die, her two sons. Clement is left at home with his father. And so then she like survives their shipwreck and goes and lives somewhere else and becomes like this woman's companion. I don't know. It's very like, I was like, what am I reading right now? But anyway, then we finally get to Clement, who in the Golden Legend is someone who's really, he's depicted as someone who's really interested in philosophy, particularly the immortality of the soul. So he becomes a disciple of St. Peter himself. And St. Peter introduces him to all these people who end up being his mother and his two brothers and his father. So that's where like it gets really soap opera-y. But anyway, so then the Golden Legend actually spends a lot of time on this sort of family drama situation. But an interesting way that the Golden Legend deals with Clement is that apparently there is a discrepancy in the way that Clement's papacy is recorded. So some authorities say that he's the second pope, or the second bishop of Rome rather, after St. Peter. And then of course officially, we know him as the third after St. Peter, following Linus and Anacletus. So what the Golden Legend says, and I don't know if this is directly to kind of clear up that discrepancy, but it says that Clement was chosen by St. Peter to be the Bishop of Rome after him. But Clement was worried about setting a precedent for the Bishop of Rome choosing his own successor. So Clement allows Linus and Anacletus to be Bishop of Rome before him, and then finally takes over after that. And then finally, very end, like the last paragraph in the Golden Legend, is about Clement's martyrdom, which traditionally is that he was martyred under the Emperor Trajan, that he's taken out on a boat and tied to an anchor and thrown into the sea. So Clement's kind of iconography includes an anchor. So to wrap up, I will point out sort of an interesting thing that Clement is also very, very briefly mentioned in Eusebius's History of the Church. Actually, Eusebius talks about Clement of Alexandria a lot more than Clement of Rome. But Clement in Eusebius is really very not really a figure at all. He mentions that he was Bishop of Rome after Linus and Anacletus. And then he says that after Clement died, the next Bishop of Rome took over. So interesting thing is that Eusebius's text does not say anything about Clement being martyred by being thrown into the sea or any other manner of martyrdom. So interesting that older, very old, much older text than the Golden Legend says that doesn't make any mention of martyrdom, but then this tradition of Clement being martyred arises somewhere.
So is there does he have any special patronages?
I did not look at that. I'm sure he does, but I didn't look that up.
So someday, Seth, I hope you tell me.
I'm so stupid. He is, because of his martyrdom, he's patron saint of like sailors and mariners and stuff.
I was going to ask if he might possibly be the patron of pirates, but that'll do. That will do.
I mean, a pirate is technically a mariner and a sailor.
Exactly. So all you One Piece and Jack Sparrow fans, also Navy, Marines, fishermen.
Oh, yeah.
Cruise liners.
I wonder if, I was going to go off on a tangent there. But
yeah. Oh,
also,
okay.
I apologize if you can hear my tuberculosis cough that I have right now.
We'll manage. Okay. So, thank you. That was really cool to learn about. So today, for our heresy of the week, we're dealing with an early church Gnostic heresy, Manichaeism. And I honestly dispute the classification of Manichaeism as a heresy, because doing my reading, it seems to me it was more a separate, straight up religion in its own right that was influenced by a lot of, Christianity and things that were going on at the time. So let me give a brief overview. It was one of the Gnostic religions that were rampant in the early centuries of the church. And it lasted from, it was founded by the Persian prophet Mani, thus the name Manichaeism. And he lived around 216 to 276. And it actually lasted until the 13th century in parts of China. It went extinct due to the Mongol invasion of China. I think that was in the Ming Dynasty. For Disney fans, that's, Mulan. That's the Mongol invasion. And the geographic spread was...
So Mulan defeated the Manichaeans.
Oh no, that she defeated the guys who defeated the Manichaeans. So yeah.
Oh, whatever.
Go Fa Mulan. The geographic spread was from China to southern Gaul, southern France. So it had a broad distribution. It lasted for a long time in parts of China. And so it was very influential of its own right. It was a mix of the sort of what was left of classical paganism, including, there were, I was looking at the creation story, definitely some almost Vedic influence, but also influence from Judaism and early Christianity. And in fact, it was such a big religion, it was for a brief time the main rival to Christianity to replace classical paganism, which had been in decline for a while. the philosophers of Greece and Rome had really been making some inroads, and that whole time period, there was a lot of sort of philosophical innovation going on. And really what it came down to was Constantine as the emperor. I had always thought that when he converted and basically chose Christianity for the Roman Empire, that he was choosing Christianity over paganism. But it really, from what I was reading, it almost was more choice. Paganism's dying. We have to have something for the people. So it's either Christianity or Manichaeism. And he chose Christianity, which we kind of lucked out. And I'll get to that in a minute on that one. The prophet Mani believed that the teachings of Buddha, Zoroaster, and Jesus were incomplete and that his revelations were for the whole world. And he has called his teachings the religion of light. And basically, this is a very strongly dualistic religion where you had a powerful but omnipotent good God versus an just about equally powerful evil God. And the creation story is, I'm just going to hit on a bit of it. Please look it up. It's great reading. Basically, there were these two entirely separate realms, one which was good and light and just wonderful, and there was one that was evil and dark. And the king of the evil dark realm took noticed the good spiritual, the good light realm, and coveted it. So he invaded it, and his creatures started devouring the light. And from this, the physical realm is created. And so everything, ultimately, there's this whole iteration of events that happens to create the physical world that we know. But basically, all living things, and especially all sentient, sapient beings, are it's that divine holy goodness from the realm of light that has been consumed and imprisoned by the evil darkness. um and
Sort of
Augustine,
sounds like a never-ending story.
it's guys, it's even, I'm going to get to like the awesomeness of this in a bit. But I wanted to
Fight the darkness, Sartex.
but before I go into paroxysms of storyteller delight on this creation story and how great it really is for as a storyteller, I will say, so St. Augustine and a lot of, or at least a fair number, a notable number of the early church fathers were actually converts to Christianity from Manichaeism. I had thought that when people talk about St. Augustine being a convert, I thought he was a convert from paganism, but he was Manichaean. And he there's actually this really great quote that I want to read. So he writes, and I believe this is in his Confessions. St. Augustine writes of his former life, I still thought that it is not we who sin, but some other nature that sins within us. It flattered my pride to think that I incurred no guilt, and when I did wrong, not to confess it. I preferred to excuse myself and blame this unknown thing which was in me but was not part of me. The truth, of course, was that it was all my own self, and my own impiety had divided me against myself. My sin was all the more incurable because I did not think myself a sinner. And that comes from that Manichaean um, break between the spirit and the body. And you can see that if you have that idea, you can say, oh, it would be easy to say, oh, it's my body that's sinning. It's not me. It's not my actual self that is sinning. So he converts, but along with a lot of the other church fathers, a lot of that the philosophy they were raised with and the cosmology that they were raised with, they bring that with them into early Christianity. Um, and things such as the nature of good and evil, the idea of hell as we conceive it today, um, the idea, the separation of people into elect and sinners, and the overall general hostility to what is considered the flesh and sexual activity. A lot of that is very heavily influenced by Manichaeist thought, which I think is an important thing to know when people are working out these ideas of their own. Where do ideas come from? It doesn't mean that necessarily they're any more or less valid, but it's important to understand how the roots of a lot of ideas start in Christianity, where they come from, how long have they really been around. So that's just something to consider. I really recommend people go look this up and learn about it, because it is so influential. Even if it was declared a heresy and wiped out, there was still leakage. There was still overflow of the ideas into a lot of the early church thinking, which then has ripples down the line for, ultimately the theology of today and the doctrines of today. So go check out Manichaeism either on Wikipedia or InfoGalactic. Just fascinating read. And I particularly loved learning about this because, as I mentioned, I think in our first podcast, I'm a science fiction and fantasy writer. Only had a couple things published so far, but I still think of that. That's part of who I am. And I was reading about this creation story, and I was thinking, with only one or two very minor tweaks, this could become the philosophical and cosmological basis of an amazing evil alien civilization in a space opera, or even just a villainous cult in an urban fantasy. Because if everything that that lives is ultimately something good and bright and wonderful that's been imprisoned against its will into dark evil flesh, well, then it's only a tiny step from there to say, well, then the ultimate act of love and liberation is to kill everything. And I was like, that would be so, I want to write this epic, either science fiction or urban fantasy, because you'd be able to write such great villains, because you could write it very easily from their point of view, being raised in this belief. And that's why I said earlier that Constantine choosing mainline Christianity over Manichaeism, he chose right. As fun as it is to read about Manichaeism, it's not hard to imagine all the ways it goes wrong. And when some of these ideas really pop back up in the Middle Ages, and you get like the Cathars, who would do things like lock children into cells to liberate them, but basically starve them to death, which is why they had to be wiped out. What they were doing to children was awful. You can see how these ideas can go very wrong very quickly. And it's only a little tweak between locking children up to starve them to death to, oh, that's too harsh. We should just slaughter all the kids. We should just kill everything that lives. So Manichaeism, great to read up on. Really fun to think about, really important to understand some of the ideas that did leak over into, honestly, the foundational theology for Christianity, but also good to appreciate that we did not go down that road, that it's a good thing we did not go there. So that is Manichaeism.
I think one of us needs to write an article that uses the term Manichaean leakage.
You know what? As soon as I said that, I was like, no, it's overflow. It's overflow.
I don't know. I think leakage is
might be
a pretty accurate term.
Okay. Yeah. So Erica, what have you got for us this week?
Picking up a little bit where Christine left off, especially as she starts talking about the Cathars and horrible things that can happen to children. Normally, I like to talk about fun subjects. I still like to talk about fun subjects. But today, we are going to talk about something that is really important to me and very, very near and dear to my heart, and part of what I work on, and on my more serious professional side, that is actually not very serious or professional at all, if you know me. But we're going to talk a little bit about when we deal with children and when we deal with doing things to children, such as the Cathars or using Manichaeism and the Manichaeist leakage in order to abuse children, right? How does that happen with Christianity? Because as Christine said, there were loopholes. There was a way to do it with Manichaeism, but and I'm going to speak from the Catholic standpoint because I'm Catholic. In the Catholic Church, we are dealing with a monumental and very depressing, serious, disgusting issue of abuse scandals. And I know there are dissenters out there who are going to say that, well, not all of these priests actually abused any children. Certainly, that could be the case. But I just want to look at numbers for a minute. And $210 million. And I'm going to speak about the Archdiocese of Chicago because I used to work in the Archdiocese of Chicago. So I am more familiar with it, and I come from more of a point of actually knowing what the hell I'm talking about. But 210 million was paid out for the sexual abuse scandal so far, and 156 million dollars is still going to be paid out to victims in these settlements. Now, the Archdiocese of Chicago has primarily used its real estate sales. They had acquired quite a bit of very expensive property throughout Chicago and surrounding areas in Illinois in order to fund the payments to the people that had these settlements. However, I will say that while I was in the diocese working, the National Catholic Reporter reported that in 2013, we had a capital campaign, and the name of it was To Teach Christ Who Is. Now, can we just talk about that name for a minute? To Teach Christ Who Is. You know, everybody said it wrong the entire time we were doing this campaign. I digress, but come on. All right. So, $427 million was raised in order to fund, it was a capital campaign to fix the schools, to fix the parishes, to fix the archdiocese. And to date, out of all of the money pledged to fix the schools, only 150 million has actually been given to those schools since 2013. Oh no, I'm sorry, back up. 150 million was pledged to the schools, and only a third of that has been given since 2013. That's not a large amount. So on one hand, we have this abuse crisis. We're selling real estate like wildfire. Over $300 million has been sold and given in settlements to survivors. And yet only a third of the money raised in this campaign in 2013, in which I can verify as somebody who was in the midst of this, the parishioners were told 100% of the money would be given out. And only a third of it has made it back to our children. What does this say about how we are treating children, about how we are raising children, about the importance that we're placing on these children? And how is it that in Christianity, in a religion where we have said, where Jesus in scripture said that the little children were the most important of the human beings, that we're able to do this, these horrendous acts to children without any recompense or even without any change over the past thousands of years. And honestly, in the United States, who knows how long this has been going on? I know there's reports back to the 1930s of sexual abuse. I think most of the payouts have happened from 1950 up until now in 2019. But how did we get here? And this is all, I promise, this is all going to come together for you. I promise. And we're going to talk about Clement of Alexandria and how he really deserves his own freaking feast day because the man was great. But I'll get to that.
Can I
Yes.
just interject one thing because I can foresee some possible pushback, and I want to make clear that we're not saying that this is a problem particular to the Catholic Church. I think we all know about what's been going on in a lot of the public schools, that this is endemic to society. But the problem is, of if anything, the Christians and the Catholics, as you said, should know better, because Jesus made such a point that if you hurt kids, literally literally better for you to have a millstone tied around your neck and you be tossed into a giant body of water. Like, Jesus wasn't messing around. So the point isn't that it's not happening across the board. The point is that we ought to know better, and why don't we? Why aren't we doing better? Sorry, I just wanted to interject that. Erica,
No. I
back
mean,
to it.
as I said from the beginning, I'm Catholic, so I'm taking this from the Catholic perspective. And obviously abuse happens across the board. But we have theology that says that we're better than that we're not using. Excuse me. And so the Associated Press has totaled worldwide, we're looking at billions and billions of dollars between 1950 and now that the Catholic Church has spent on this. And I also want to make it clear, for me, it's not about the money, but I will say that working in a diocese, an archdiocese, one of the top questions I got was, if I donate to the church, am I helping fund the settlements for the abuse crisis? Now, the quick answer was no, and it was a true answer. The money that was given went to other projects to help the homeless, wherever it said it was going. However, the archdiocese is going bankrupt. It has closed many schools because they cannot fund them. It's closed parishes because they cannot fund them, because the money that could be used to help the archdiocese is being sold in these settlements. Right now, though, moving away from that, and I just go into that because of all of the questions that have arisen in terms of donations. But right now, I really want to focus on what's happening with the kids. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of children worldwide since 1950, which is when most of these accounts, as I say, these settlements go back to, have been abused by people they should have been able to trust without a doubt, without hesitation. And children innately trust those who we tell them to trust, people that are in positions of power, who say, I am here to be there for you and I am here to help you. On the other side, and outside of Catholicism, and perhaps one thing that we as Catholics need to focus on as well is just the human trafficking issue in general. So children are seen as objects, and when something is an object, you can use it. Many theologians, Augustine is one of them that pops into my head, has said people are to be loved and objects are to be used. And we're using children and certainly not giving them the love that they deserve or even the respect. There's approximately 40 million people total that experience human trafficking each year. The United Nations has an Office of Drugs and Crime, and I'm not going to go into people's political beef with the United Nations. Certainly, everybody has a political concern. But this office mostly deals with people who are in need of assistance. And 79% of that 40 million experience sexual abuse and exploitation when they are part of this human trafficking. Out of those 40 million people, 20 to 25 estimated percentage of the victims are children. And they have seen children as young as the age of 5 In fewer cases, they have seen newborns being trafficked for these purposes, which infuriates me and it saddens me. And I am sorry to even talk about it because I do realize, having two kids of my own, that the amount of sorrow that that can bring you is immense. So we're talking about 10 million children worldwide at any given time that are being exploited for these uses. The other highest percentage, I think it was about 13% of these kids are being used for forced labor, likened to um, the cocoa plantations. I know kidnapping in Burkina Faso has been a major problem implemented by these cocoa plantations in Africa. So when we're talking about child labor, Africa, unfortunately, is one of the largest centers of where these children are trafficked for reasons of labor. So how did we get here? And so this is the point. This is where I want to get here. I wanted to give you guys some idea of how dire the situation is, because it is dire. And then I want to ask, how do we get here and how do we fix what we're doing? Now, the fixing, honestly, I'm going to tell you, I don't have an answer for that right now. But I think we can work on it and get to a better position. The average age of children forced into prostitution, even though we do have those younger ages, is between 13 and 14 years old. They are very vulnerable at that age. And I'm not going to tell you exactly where I live because I don't want you people showing up at my doorstep. But I will tell you that I do live around Wisconsin, Illinois, Midwest region. And even a city as small as Rockford, Illinois, is ranked number 2 in the state of Illinois for human trafficking. Obviously, Chicago would be number 1. It's a huge city. And Illinois in itself is ranked number 10 in the United States for human trafficking. So this is happening in small towns. It's happening right under our noses. If you live by an interstate, chances are there is human trafficking happening right where you are. It's scary. As a parent, that's terrifying. It is terrifying. So how did we get here? Let's talk about Clement for a little bit. And we're going to keep all those things in your head, and then we're going to move on and discuss who Clement is and why I think he is a very important figure when we're talking about kids. Clement was born in Athens, so he's Greek, nice Greek guy, 150 AD, and he died in Jerusalem in 215 after being ousted and kind of like thrown all over the place during all of these wars. As a young man, though, he ended up in Alexandria, which is why we call him Clement of Alexandria. Pretty cool, huh? And his teacher was a fellow by the name of Pantaenus. And Pantaenus was a teacher, and he really believed in the catechetical schools. For those of you who are not sure what catechetical means, it is a school where you are taught about your faith, about the foundations of your religion, theology, spirituality, basically likened to going to catechesis nowadays, but much more efficient. And adults went. So this was not something that was just for kids. These were adults that were attending the catechetical schools. And these were very important to Pantaenus. And so they became very, very important to Clement once his mentor died. And Clement picked up and started writing and teaching. And eventually he had students, as I think Christine had mentioned earlier, or no, Seth, one of you mentioned it earlier, that Origen then became one of the students of Clement. So he really influenced the mysticism, he influenced Gnosticism, and even Pseudo-Dionysius, another writer who came much later on. But Clement, perhaps for me, his most interesting elements were not the highly mystical, and it was not the teaching of adults, but it was what he said about children. Unlike some of the other writers of the time, even my beloved Aristotle, oh, I love Aristotle, but it makes me sad because Aristotle basically thought children were just clumps of material. They were not reasoning beings. They were, forgive the word, stupid, his word, not mine, but they were not anything special. They were beings likened to an animal. And by the time Clement comes along, and Clement is he's a middle Platonist. So what that means is I'm sure, heard of the philosopher Plato. A lot of what Clement's material picks up on is Middle Platonism. So he uses terms that Plato would have used, but he takes a slightly more Christian bend on Plato's material. So when Clement talks about children, the first thing he does is he turns to scripture. And he says, okay, well, what did Jesus say? What were the words in scripture, in the Bible, at the time, what he had together about children? And the first thing that he notes is that they're not animals at all. And they have their own sense of reason. Even young children, toddlers, infants, they have a sense of reason that they need to have in order to grow and to become adults. They are also the most important and blessed, as I said earlier, of our human beings. And Clement started to piece all of these together, and you can read it in his work, The Instructor, or by the Greek title, Pedagogus. And because they have reasoning, and because they have importance, and because, as Christine said, Jesus was very clear and several times throughout scripture, and I'm sure we could list those for you. If anybody's interested, send us a message. Children are to be protected and cared for. So why did we lose this? Well, that answer is very long. I'm going to give you the short of it. As time went on throughout the Catholic Church, we picked up on certain teachings and certain authors more than others. And unfortunately, as Seth has mentioned, Clement of Alexandria at the time did not have the mainstream theology. So a lot of what he wrote went by the wayside and became less important than some of the bigs that were coming along, like St. Augustine, right? Augustine comes along, and I love Augustine. I love Augustine. But there's some problems. There's some problems. He's based first in Manichaeism. He has this really negative view of the self. And I think this gets in the way, particularly when we're dealing with children. So how do we reconquer this? Well, first of all, we have to stop thinking of children as things. They're not objects that we should be doing anything to. And I'm not saying don't discipline your children. If anybody knows me, I am one serious mama. Those children do not peep when they are not supposed to peep. But I also realize that they have reason, and that they have to be not just told what not to do, but they have to understand their actions and what is going to happen with their actions. As a modern day church, we've lost sight of what Clement had first said and what he dug through the scriptures to find in regards to our children. I do not see how any priest, coach, teacher, person out on the street, next door neighbor, could abuse a child, particularly sexually abuse a prepubescent child, if they viewed them as a person and not an object, and not an object of their own desires to be done to or to be done with. They would have to face the fact that they are violating God's law, that they're violating what Jesus said in the scripture. And as Christians, particularly as Catholics, I think that we would have to face a mirror of our own inner sin and horribleness for those that commit crimes against children. So that's the ins and outs of Clement a little bit. Obviously, there is a ton more material that you could go into on Clement. And if you are interested in talking about Clement, again, feel free to contact me. I can help you. I can point you in the right direction. But Clement is a really great source in the early church, a fantastic example when talking about infants and children, the good of infants and children, and how we should treat and ultimately respect them. So having said that, I do have a couple recommendations. I'm also going to just slide. If anybody has anything to say, jump in. I'm going to slide into the entertainment recommendations for this week. And we have two slightly more serious, again, I mean, it's a serious topic, right? Serious entertainment suggestions. And the first one that I'd like to bring up is a movie called Precious. And it came out in 2009. It's about an hour and 49 minutes long. It is rated R, folks. I know. I'm going to have to find you guys something you can watch with your kids, because I'm kind of Debbie Downer with the movies here and the shows. It has a lot of inappropriate things that no child should be watching, even your teenagers. I think if you have somebody who is a late teens and you know their maturity level, I think that they would be able to watch it, but you should watch it with them. So the story is about Precious Jones, and the movie takes place in the 1980s. If you have seen the title card for Precious, if you've seen the movie posters, Precious is played by Gabri Sidibe. I forgive me for pronouncing your name incorrectly. I have practiced and I messed it up again. But she is an incredibly, incredibly talented actress. She is also, and I am just going to say it because I am also not the thinnest person in the world, she is a heavy-set girl. She is overweight. She is illiterate, and she is made fun of incessantly for who she is. So coming back to Manichaeism for a second, this movie kind of fits in nicely with our Manichaeism about the body being a cage and the soul is the important part. And I think nowadays we're looking at a lot of body positivity movements and I'm not talking about not being healthy, folks. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking specifically about loving your total package as God intended you to be. And so we see a character in Precious who is unable to do that because she's been so abused throughout her entire life. I won't tell you the whole, again, I hate giving away stories, but it is a story of abuse. She is a teenager who is facing, similar to the teenagers that I was talking about with the abuse scandals and human trafficking, she is facing sexual abuse at the hands of people that are close to her. And as her story unfolds, you see not only the dire effects that abuse has on a person and how it breaks them, but also how she eventually comes out of it. So very important story. It is based on a true story. It has 4.5-star rating on Amazon, 710 reviews. IMDb is a 7.3 review. So it's substantially, it's done very, very well. Mariah Carey, Sherry Shepherd, Lenny Kravitz, there's some big names in there as well. And the DVD on Amazon is $6.20. Come on, people, that's a steal. Just watch it. Peer pressure. And the multi-format is $6.46. So that's one of my recommendations. Quickly, I will go to the second one. The Magdalene sisters, a little bit older, came out in 2002, and it is running just shy of 2 full hours. Also has a 4.5-star rating and 7.7 rating on IMDb. And this is a little bit more historic. It is also rated R. I'm so sorry. But it's a good film. It's takes place across the pond. So the Magdalene laundries, for those of you who don't know, were basically places that they used to hide teenage girls in Ireland. And usually they were pregnant or abused or had gotten into trouble one way or another. And the solution was not to help or to find a way to help these girls move on with their lives, but to hide them away in places where the nuns used to take care of them. And they would be put to work and they would live there until they were 18 years old, or sometimes, most of the time, a great many times, they would actually end up joining the convent because they were shamed by society. Also a very, very good movie. And this one, if you're interested, as I said, it's a little bit more historical. It's $5.15 on DVD through Amazon. They are both available on Instant Watch on Amazon as well, if you're interested in doing that. But two very good movies kind of associated with what we're doing. And, learn more always keep your eyes open for kids that are acting a little bit strange, withdrawn. If those of you who are teachers or are in positions where you're a mandated reporter, certainly if you find that there's a child that looks like they are in need, they probably are. And I'm not saying you have the ability directly to do anything, but you certainly have the ability to find somebody who can. So that is what I have for this week. Any questions, comments, problems?
I First of all, I want to thank you for doing that. I know you and I have we've discussed the whole human trafficking and abuse of children situation on our own previously, and I know that that's something very important to both of us. But I also want to just put in my 2 cents about the whole some of what you came into later on when you were talking about Precious, and going back to the Manichaeism and what quote body positivity really should be, because I see a lot of, if there's one thing, well, there's many things that get on my dang nerves, but one of the things that really gets on my dang nerves is um you and Seth both know that I've struggled with weight my entire life. And at my worst, I was, we think, we think about 450 pounds. Um, we think that because I did not weigh myself until I'd already lost an entire pant size. And at that point, I was at 425. So the 450 is an estimate. And when I was in that when I was in that state, I was also very emotionally and mentally vulnerable. And some of the worst poison that I've ever had said to me was said to me at that time. And that poison, it didn't hurt. I didn't, well, immediately looking back, it was awful. But what the poison I got, it wasn't one from one person either. There's a lot of this in society, was this idea of, it's all that's what's in the inside that count. The outside doesn't matter. Um, just don't worry about it. That's just the way you are. Love yourself just the way you are. But part of that message was um the connotation in the way it was delivered and in society was, because that is the way you are and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's why I call it poison. And because I was in such a mentally and emotionally vulnerable state, I didn't recognize it for what it was right away. In fact, I actually, that is what ultimately led to the sort of the loss of will and mental discipline that allowed me to get to 450. I'd been pretty heavy before. There were also other things. I was dealing with the aftermath of treatment for cancer, which will screw up anyone's body. This just, and the medical establishment, I have my own beef with them about it. This was just, the kind of the cherry on top. Um, and so when I think about, I'll still see that sort of message being put out on mass media, social media, and it bothers me to no end because I do struggle with this. And the idea that your physical being doesn't matter, it's only what's on the inside, your spiritual and mental self that counts. Um, that is wrong. That's the only way I can put it. It's wrong and it's poison. And I'm not saying that you should be ashamed if you have weight problems, because I'm still working on it. It has taken me so long to figure out what works, and it's not what the doctors told me. I would do what they told me. It wouldn't work, and I had doctors accusing me of lying. I know how hard the struggle is, but I also know how important being healthy is, being active is, taking care of the body that God gave you. If our body is the temple of the Spirit, we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to the God that made us to take the best care of it that we can. are there going to be problems, or are there going to be just certain genetic things that, or environmental things that we can't get away from? Absolutely. But if I can hearken to some of my own pop culture references, there's actually something that really helped me start to get out of the funk that I was in and really get my will and my discipline back to straightening my life out. There's a wonderful kind of weird animation. It's an anime called Soul Eater, and it takes this very stylized, takes a while to get used to for your eyes. But I'm not going to tell you what it's about this episode, but if you want, you can look it up. Soul Eater, great time. The beginning of every episode, there was sort of this. It was always introduced with the main character Maka, saying the same thing. It was sort of like her a sort of a personal mantra or motto, and it really got through to me. And it was translated into English as, a sound soul requires a sound mind and a sound body. And so when it comes to body positivity, and not the Manichaean view that the physical doesn't matter, it's only the spiritual that matters, as opposed to the more holistic view that Catholicism and traditional Christianity has. You owe it to yourself, and your mental and emotional state will be so much improved when you know that you are doing everything you can to take care of yourself. If you're eating nutritious food, if you are being active, if you are monitoring your blood chemistry and finding out as best you can what the root problems are. And whether that's because, like myself, you are struggling with being overweight, or conversely, you're struggling with being underweight, or perhaps you have some other chronic problem that you are struggling and dealing with. Everyone has those. Everyone has something going on with their body that they're struggling with, that they're working with, and it may not be immediately apparent to you. They may look like the Greek perfection of, the athletic ideal, but you don't know about the joint pain they suffer from all the time, or the something wrong with their nervous system. Everyone has something. But to me, what body positivity should be is embracing that your physical self is a gift too, and respecting it and taking care of it as best you can. And you find that when you know that you're doing the best you can and everything you can to respect this gift, then even if other people are making fun of you, it doesn't affect you the same way. It doesn't sink in, because you know you're doing what you can, you're on top of it. If they don't understand what's going on with you, really, who are they? Who are these people? Either they don't matter or they shouldn't matter. And that is my piece.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think part of what I love about Clement so much, to bring this back to Clement for a minute, is Clement would agree with you. The body is meant to be kept healthy, and also to be loved, to be revered. I think what we're facing is a reaction to people being horrible, right? To people
Yes.
being jerks. I hear the reports of women and men who go to the gym and are made fun of for being overweight. And I just want to kick somebody, because I'm like, are you seriously? They got
Yeah.
up out of bed and decided to make a change, and now you're being a jerk. Okay. So yeah, I think what we're seeing is a reaction to that, to people who are
Yeah.
saying that they're not going to take it anymore because they're fed up. And I agree with that. But I also go back to what Christine is saying, that you need to find your healthy spot, right? You need to find what is going to make your body the best possible version of itself, and forget the physical look. We're talking about being absolutely healthy. Take care of your health issues and balance it out. You take care of your health issues, you're taking care of your soul, and vice versa. And one feeds into the other and makes the other even more beautiful. And I think one of the great things about Precious is the point where she gets fed up and decides that she is going to change her life. And that is the part where you say, yes, good. And that, to me, totally agreed. That is not just body positivity, it's self positivity, it's self liberating. So I completely agree with that. And don't forget, I'm speaking from the point of where Christine's at, of being on the heavy side here my entire freaking life. I'm Italian and Portuguese, people. Let me tell you how this goes. You tell your grandparents that you're not hungry, and they tell you that you are, and then you eat. And then you tell them again that you're not hungry, and then they tell you that you haven't eaten enough, so you eat more. And then as a teenager, you tell your Portuguese Italian grandfather that you're going on a diet. He mentions to you that the word die is in the word diet and that you should just keep eating. So that's about the extent of my childhood and what has happened to this body.
And
My grandfather,
how
there's
much in the
great
way
body
of
positivity
carbs?
there. Yes.
How much in the way
Yeah.
of carbs was that being crammed down your
Yeah, no
throat?
kidding. I mean, we're talking about salami and hunks of bread and some pasta. So there we go. Uh, but on the other side of it, I also have some very dear friends who have faced the opposite problem of anorexia and bulimia, and have even seen family members die from that too. So it works both ways. I
Well,
don't
and I
think we
think
talk enough about the people on the other side that are suffering as well. And so it's important to keep that in mind too.
at both extremes there is or there can be, not necessarily there is, but there certainly can be. And I know there was for me for a long time, that almost very Manichaean distance from my own physical self, where I thought my body was the enemy. I and I remember crying tears of frustration, and telling myself, looking in the mirror and screaming at myself what a how pathetic I was, and what a loser I was, because I couldn't get this. I just kept getting worse and worse, and the real turnaround for me was realizing, no, Christine, your body's not the enemy. Your body has been subjected to a full year of chemical warfare, followed by a full month of daily radiation. Um, that is one going to screw up anybody. Yes, they fixed my cancer, but there were consequences, and realizing, one, it had been through all of that, and then starting to do a lot of my own research and coming to terms with the fact that basically everything I'd ever been told from any health or medical authority regarding proper nutrition was not only wrong, but it was about as inverted and wrong as it could possibly have been and still be in English. Um, and realizing, even down to the exercise recommendations, I had always been, taught cardio, but I should have been doing resistance work the whole time. Once I realized that the enemy wasn't my body, the enemy was the sickness it had been through. The enemy, I don't want to necessarily paint the entire medical health industry in a bad light, but the enemy at the very least had been the very, very bad nutritional and health guidance I had been given. Once I realized that and took things into my own hand and decided that I was done with being weak and done with being pathetic, it made a huge change, which ended up helping me in a spiritual sense, helping my relationship with God, helping my mentality, helping my emotions. Like, it is all connected. Um, and I think there's probably some of that on the other side with the anorexia and the bulimia, the mentality, you did this little sliver of belief that'll get into your psyche that my body isn't doing what I want it to do, therefore it's the enemy. No, not necessarily. Your body's not the enemy. It's just you haven't yet figured out the right way to get your body to where you want it to be. But I do want to say, for anyone out there who's dealing with any of these, you will find a way. You just got to keep trying and looking and researching. And don't, whatever you do, don't give up. Don't despair, because that's when you have a problem. But as long as you can look in the mirror and know that you are doing what you can, and you're looking for that way, you're looking for the best way to get your body to be healthy according to your genetics, according to your environment. You'll be amazed at how quickly the emotional aspect of it resolves. But just keep plugging away, because being a big girl, I have found the way to start shedding the pounds. And I'm certain that on the other side, with the anorexia and the bulimia, whatever it is on your side that you're dealing with, you will find a way through. Just pray about it and keep working on it.
I think we all had our mics muted at the same time. um, okay. Well, yeah, I mean, thank you guys for sharing that stuff with us. That's really important. Just a couple things that I thought about as you were speaking so well on these issues is, first of all, a social media account that I personally follow is called iWay. It's I_way. And it is a body positivity community. But I think what the issue really is, for at least for that community, is being accepting of all types of bodies and all types of ways people are. Not so much as saying what the inside, what's on the inside counts and what's on the outside doesn't count. No, I think what they're saying is what's on the outside counts as well, and it doesn't need to fit into this kind of media driven image of what's acceptable as a body that we all take in through magazines and movies and Instagram, and like, oh, my body has to look this way if I'm
Well,
gonna
and none of those images are real anyway.
exactly. So people look different, thank God, so it's like, and be who you are, and love yourself. um a couple other points that I just thought up as you were talking, is that I think that we, as a, I mean, at least and have a problem treating children as objects. It's not just a Christian or Catholic problem. I mean, the fact that we have children in cages on our southern border kind of shows that we aren't thinking of those children as fully human beings. And that's not to get into any political things about immigration, but I think whatever you feel about immigration, that children should not be caged and die in custody of the United States. So I think we have a larger issue of treating children as objects than just a Catholic or Christian um, situation there. And then the last thing, the kind of positive note I wanted to end on is, in case some of our listeners don't know, some of the biggest opponents, a group of people working against human trafficking, is actually Catholic sisters, some of whom are like undercover, like doing stuff, which is super rad, I think.
Are you able to provide any links to where we can learn about what they do and
I don't have any off the top of my head. I didn't think to prepare that when we were talking
well,
series.
email me and I'll try to make sure it's in the show notes for anyone, because that sounds super rad.
Yeah, I think. I think you could do a search and pretty much find some stuff,
Okay.
but I'll see if I can find anything specific. I know that the community of sisters that I belong to as an oblate is very not engaged in the undercover stuff, or maybe they are, who knows. But they are very
Secret sisters.
they are very supportive of the fight against human trafficking. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And really important note, I think, Seth, because yeah, as much as we have problems in Catholicism, there are problems everywhere in every organization. And we do also have great people, though, who are trying to fix it. And certainly our sisters have been some of the best and at the forefront. And the nuns that I met in Chicago were really, really incredible ladies. So, yeah, we do have some great people trying to fix the problem.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been a more intense episode than others that we've had. So thank you guys for that. I will try to oh, by the way, everyone, yes, please follow us if you want to discuss any of this, or maybe things we didn't point out, or things that you want to dispute with us. We do encourage community participation and feedback. So find us on Facebook, find us on Twitter, find us on Instagram. We are setting up a YouTube. We've got the first 2 episodes of our podcast there. So as they say, like, share, and subscribe. We will be trying to get the rest of the episodes that we have recorded up, but takes a bit of time to put those together, even though they're basically slideshows. Was there anything else? Oh, right. The next week that we have coming up is Thanksgiving week here in the U.S. Right. Deep fried turkey. Gonna do it the Cajun way. We are planning to do a short sort of Thanksgiving special. It is going to be a lot shorter, certainly, than this episode is going to be, because I'm looking at our time, and even after editing, this is going to, I think, be our longest episode so far. But the Thanksgiving special will be maybe 20, 30 minutes max. So keep an eye out for that. And anything else you guys wanted to say before we stop the recording?
Nah, just be awesome. Go do something nice for somebody this week.
Yeah. Okay. Well then, thank you everyone for joining us, and we will be back soon with the Thanksgiving special. See you later.